I have always been into cars. When I was a very small child, my mother told her friends that she had given birth to a V8 engine because I was always making car noises.
Man in the Sonett.
Cars have been a big thing in my family. Several members of my family have been involved in either specific kinds of cars or collecting cars or just playing with cars in general. We're all fans. Whoa! I grew up around interesting cars. My dad had a 48 Willys Jeepster. Later on, he had a 68 Karmann Ghia convertible. That was a really neat car. His whole side of the family was really all of the automotive. My grandfather is really where it all started, I would say. My great-grandfather was really into Cadillacs. My grandfather was really into cars and toys. My grandfather was really into Schuco wind-up toys. When we were little, he had a house in Rehoboth Beach that had a pool room in the basement, and he had a cabinet in that room that was just Schuco, some other interesting trinkets, but lots of Schuco wind-up toys. There were cars all around me when I was little. I had a neighbor down the road who owned a Maserati Ghibli Spider, and I would pedal my bike by that thing, and it was just the neatest car. We would ride bikes down to this pool, and there was a guy down there that owned a Marcos. And I didn't know what it was at first, but I had books already. I'm 10 years old. I got car books. And so I started digging through my books, and sure enough, I find a picture of one of these things in one of my books. I'm like, oh, it's a Marcos. And I'm reading about Volvo 3-liter engines, and they have plywood hulls and all this stuff. So I'm 11 years old, and I'm always hoping to run into this guy. And I finally run into him, and I say, so does this have the Volvo 3-liter in it? And this guy's like, what? What did you just ask me? Also, as a kid, because I was so into cars, I had tons of Matchboxes, Corgis, Matchbox Super Kings. I loved the larger Matchboxes. I like to build models. I built just dozens and dozens of plastic models. For Christmas, several years in a row, I have a picture of this around here somewhere too. I think it was Monogram, I think, used to make these massive 1/8 scale models. There was an orange 78 Corvette. I built that one. There was a red, I think it was a 65 Corvette, built that one. And I got an 85, this dark maroon Camaro Z28, built that one. I have a picture of the orange Corvette. I was probably 10 or 11 years old when I built that. And I finished it so fast that I have a picture of it under the Christmas tree because I spent the whole week after Christmas in the basement of my dad's workbench putting this car together and had it back up before the tree even came down. So that's a fun memory. And then the Saab thing, I wasn't always a Saab person. I always thought Saabs were cool. I was really into BMWs when I was little. I was into Corvettes. I was into a lot of different cars. But I have an aunt, Peggy. Ed's sister, and her husband, Steve, have only ever driven Saabs. They've had many Saabs, and I remember being little and Peggy driving, I think she had a 95 wagon with the little finned rear fenders, and she's had multiple Saabs. So much later in life, when my wife and I bought our first Saab, I just said to her, we joined the fraternity. She looked at me and she said, you bought a Saab? And I said, yes, we did. And that was our first one. That was a neat car. And back in college, 1989 or so, it had been known that Steve had purchased a Saab Sonett out of an estate, but nobody ever saw it. At least I hadn't ever seen it. My brother had never seen it. We just knew that there was this other car that they had, this Saab Sonett. And for years I would say to Steve, what are you doing with that car? And he would say, oh, we're talking about putting an electric engine in it, or it needs a new motor, or it won't pass inspection, and it's been sitting. It had been stored at Sport Specialist down in Wilmington. I hope I have that name right. Bill Jacobson's shop. Bill Jacobson is a well-known Saab guy. He's purchasing cars out of the Saab Museum, and he has a really neat little Saab collection museum down in Wilmington. And the Sonett sat at Bill's place for 30 years. Every once in a while did some tinkering, did some things to it. But this car is pretty much original. It's only got about 37,000 miles on it. It's got a hot cam in it. The guy who had owned it before my uncle apparently did some autocrossing in it. We don't know which cam is in it. There's really only two choices. It's either an Iscadarian or it's a Saab hot cam. I think it's probably an Iscadarian, but we don't know. So finally, my mom threw herself a birthday party, and I ran into my Uncle Steve, and for the 20th time probably, I said, Steve, what are you doing with that car? And he said, make me an offer. So I was in Wilmington, another business, and I stopped by Bill Jacobson's place. And I said that I was Steve's nephew, and he knew Steve really well because he's been fixing their Saabs for years. And he said, oh yeah, come on, walk around. So he showed me through the museum section, and he showed me through the whole shop. And I said, well, now my Uncle Steve's got a Saab Sonett that I've never seen. It's around here somewhere. And he said, well, it's that one right there. And I saw this really neat little green Sonnet that was in a lot better condition than I expected. And I said, well, what does it need? He's like, well, it really doesn't need anything. It doesn't pass inspection because it blows some smoke. And we've been doing things to it, but it's pretty much ready to go. So then I ran into my Uncle Steve at my mother's birthday party and basically said, hey, Steve, what are you going to do with the Sonnet? And he said, you know what, make me an offer. So I went back down to Bill's and really looked it over, took dozens of photographs and asked Bill a lot of questions and did a little research online, and then I made him an offer. And he wanted a little more than I wanted to spend, so we met in the middle and I brought it home. It has been an extremely fun and rewarding car to play with. It's my fourth Saab. I have become a bit of a Saab addict in the last several years. My wife is responsible for the first one. We were in the minivan phase, and she said, we got to get out of minivan phase. I want something fun and interesting. And I love turbos. I've always been a fan of Volkswagen turbos. And she like used Audis, used Saabs, and we went to this place and found this black 5-door Saab 9.3 turbo, and we drove it for 5 minutes, and she was like, yes, this is it. And then the Sonnet came along, and I like original cars. It is a 20-footer. It's got some nicks and marks and some rust on the bottoms of the rockers, but it's just such a fun, wonderful car to cruise around in. We should take it out and enjoy it.
Look at the hood floating. Pretty good. It's 4-speed?
Yeah.
God, it's a cool little car, man. Ooh. Yeah, baby.
Janet said it best at a meeting one month. He said, you like to drive slow cars fast. And I was like, yeah, exactly. This car is slow. It just feels fast and it's fun to drive.
Well, that's why people love Miatas so much.
Yeah, they're... Yeah. See, I need a 5th gear right here. Really
yeah, boom.
But I'm out. It sounds really good.
Feels like you're going fast.
Yeah. We're going maybe 50.
Definitely feels faster.
And then in 70, they changed body style to the Sonnet 3. And that's actually an Italian design. It's very similar. Center, doors, cabin, very similar to the 2, but the nose and the rear end design are slightly different than the Sonnet 2's. It's a German-sourced V4. It's an engine out of Ford Taunus and also forklifts. It's a really interesting little motor, a rare style V4 engine. They uprated the engines from 1500 to 1700s because of emissions, but they still had about the same power as the 1500 from the 1970. This is a 71. They built a total of about 1,500 in 1971, and across the 2s and 3s, they built a total of about 8,000.
It does, it really does.
This has just been a wonderful pleasure to own and fix up. I've done a lot to it to bring it back to life, but mostly it's in really great shape.